Yeah, I kind of take it from the top. I guess for the past kind of couple weeks, I never thought I was going to get traded from the Mets. Kind of the sentiment amongst the clubhouse. Even though we were struggling, that we were going to reload for 2024. All the guys that were still under contract for next year. We kind of thought with Steve there that we would reload. That was just kind of the sentiment amongst the clubhouse. So I never thought I was going to get traded. Then kind of a couple days ago, I had some players across the league texting me like saying like, "Hey, we've made some trade offers for you. Are you going to get traded? Would you accept the trade?" I was like, I didn't think I was going to get traded. And then I made my start, and that's when I said, obviously I need to have a conversation with the Mets because we had just traded David Robertson. And then all of a sudden now I'm getting questions from other players across the league. And so that's when the next day I had a talk with Billy, and with Billy, we talked. I asked, kind of what's going on, what's our viewpoint of the deadline, and more importantly, what's the view for 2024. And his answer was that the team is now kind of shifting vision, and that they're looking to compete now for 2025 and 2026, and that 2024 it was not going to be a reload situation in New York, and that it was going to be more of a transition in 2024, and that we're looking to make decisions for to compete outside my contract window. I said, okay, that's a brand news to me, different than what I'd ever heard out of Steve's mouth. I was like, all right, I got to hear this directly from Steve. So I had a phone call with Steve, and he basically articulated the same vantage point, that was the new vision for the Mets. That was the new timeline that they were identifying, and that players that were under contract for next year, that they could be potentially sold off at the deadline right now, and that the team could be really flipped around at the deadline, as we speak. And so once it became official, that's the vision for the Mets. Then I said yes, I will waive my no trade clause underneath those pretenses.
You've obviously taken a leadership role, wherever you've been and in baseball in general. Do you feel like that you were able to be in more of control because of your contract situation and where you are in your career, to where you did feel like you were holding some of the cards?
Well, I think it was just an honest conversation between both sides, and understanding what both sides were trying to want. The Mets, we went into the season, with high expectations. Rightfully so. We had a very good team. Unfortunately, we didn't play up to it. And because of where everybody is at within their contract situation, age, everything, Billy and Steve, they had a different vision now. The math changed on them. They wanted to be able to flip guys for prospects, and so they were willing to, I assume they still are, looking to be able to trade guys off their roster to try to get more players that are going to be with them in those seasons in 2025 and 2026 that can help them win then. And every team has the right to do that. I totally get where they're coming from. I understand from roster construction what's going on in New York. That's a decision they had to make. It's tough making those decisions, but that's why they're paid to make the big bucks to be able to make those decisions. And for me, it was just being a part of that conversation and understanding that, and realizing that I was only under contract for one more season after this, and that honestly, the best thing for both parties was to accept the trade.
Hey Max, Evan Grant, Dallas Morning News.
Mm-hmm.
So on the timeline, you made your comments about needing to have a conversation with the front office Friday night, right?
Right.
Saturday, you spoke to both Billy and Steve.
Yes.
At what point in time did they ask you specifically about the Rangers, or did they just ask in general if you would be willing to waive the no trade?
I think that when I communicated that, I had people text me. I had people text me from various teams. Obviously, this was one of the teams as well, and that there was a trade offer on there. And I was able to talk with my wife about the different teams that were interested. And the best thing for our family was to come here. I live in Florida, and and keeping the kids in school in Florida, presents some challenges during the season. And so for me, this was close enough to Jupiter, so that I continue to play my career, but at the same time I get to maximize the amount of time I get to spend with my kids.
And so, what sold you besides your personal situation, which I'm not diminishing at all, but what sold you on this team and where they're headed this year and next year?
Obviously, I mean, this team's in first place for a reason. They've been playing great baseball, and obviously, when you get called, you look back in my career when I've been traded, it's always been traded to a team that wants you and is in a good situation. And so, with Texas calling, realizing the situation that I had in New York, and realizing the situation that was now developing in Texas, that this was going to be the best place for me to continue my career and to have a chance to be able to win as well.
Max Scherzer with the AP. Obviously, you have history with Mike Maddox. All the guys that came in have history with Mike Maddox. Talk about the comfort there and what that does. And if this place didn't have a roof, would you have waived your no-trade?
Well, I don't know what would happen if we were in the old stadium. That would be a much different thing. It's hot, but I like it hot, so who knows? That'll be fun speculation. But this is fun to get back with Mad Dog. I had a great run with him there in DC with him. Talking to the guys, it seems like he's got the same lingo, the same way he breaks down hitters. And so he's a great baseball mind. He really studies the game, really studies the hitters, really comes up with very good reports. Probably some of the best reports I've come across in my time in the big leagues. And so I've really enjoyed working with him. So when I knew he was a pitching coach, I knew that this would be an easy transition for me.
Lawrence Al, Forward Star Telegram. You spent some time with the Fort Worth Cats in the past. Can you talk about what you remember about your time with them?
I know, hit the Wayback Machine. How about that? I was a Fort Worth Cat there in 2007. It's been a minute. That was an interesting time because that was back when the whole draft rules where you could the team still maintained your rights all the way through the next calendar year, and the Diamondbacks thought I was hurt, and I had to go out there and pitch and show that I wasn't hurt. That was a fun process. That whole process, that was a wake up to the business side of the ball game, of that it's not just about playing baseball. There's a whole business component to this, and these teams will absolutely try to use your love for baseball to try to get their way in whatever they want. And that was a wake up call to understand that no, you got to take care of business first before you get to play baseball. And that was a painful process, but a necessary process. And I'm glad they got rid of that rule that now the deadline's here like in the middle of July, I think, after the draft. But just first taste of pro ball, me playing in Fort Worth and getting a feel for that, and remember my time fondly here.
Max, Stephen Stevenson, Sports Illustrated. Can you speak to how your season's gone and how maybe jumping into a first place contest alters how you go about your things?
Yeah, I've kind of had a Jekyll and Hyde season. There's been some starts I pitched well, and some starts I haven't. I've been getting beat by the long ball, and it's because of executions. My location. I'm leaving the ball in the middle of the plate. I've been giving up homers at a rate I'm not comfortable with, and I've been trying to make adjustments over the past this whole time of trying to iron it out to figure out what exactly I need to be to execute all my pitches where I want them. I feel like over the past couple of weeks I've kind of identified some of the right things. At first it was hanging too many sliders. I feel like I've kind of corrected that. I feel like I've been executing my slider much better as of late. And then trying to execute to all quadrants. You're getting my fastball to all quadrants, cutter to where I need to be, and was able to execute that last time out pretty well. So as much as it's been frustrating and it's been up and down for me, I'm also in a spot where I'm healthy. I'm getting my mechanics right, throwing the ball well, and you get the first place. Now you got to win. You come here, you got to win. That's what it's about. But that's what I love to be.
Levi Weaver with The Athletic. You've been a part of some very good rotations in your career. I'm curious how it's day one, so maybe a little too early for that, but how you feel like this rotation in Texas stacks up, both this year and then, as deGrom comes back next year, Kind of how do you view this rotation that you're joining?
Yeah, there's some guys I've seen pitch over the years. Eovaldi, John Gray, Montgomery. Those guys specifically. I know those guys can go out there and pitch. Very well. And so it's now getting to learn the other guys that are part of this organization and seeing what they do. Obviously, Mad Dog's got a good thing going here. They've been throwing the ball pretty well and having good success here. And so for me, it's just coming in, blend in, do my job. It's not necessarily to be a part, protecting the other stars. It's about protecting the bullpen. My job is to pitch deep in the ball game to protect the bullpen arms. So, with everybody down there as well, that's my job, and try to learn the other guys as much as possible.
I'm Max Kennedy Landry, MLB.com. You played for a lot of different managers. How are you feeling about coming in, playing for Bruce Bochy, and building that relationship that you can have there?
Yeah, another old school manager I get to play with. I feel like I've gotten all of them between Dusty, Jim Leland, Buck, now Bochy. So they all seem like they're cut from the same kind of cloth. They're all old school. They all like it. They all think kind of the same way. They just have a little different personalities about to go about it. But yeah, can't wait to get around Boch and see his personality, see how he views the game, and just how he manages it, and how his relationships and how he communicates with everybody. So, it'll be fun to get on the same side with them. I've been competing against them for a good amount of time, but it'll be fun to compare notes.
Hey, I'm curious, did you reach out to deGrom while you were trying to make your decision? And if anything, what was the message Jacob gave you about his experience so far here?
I talked to Jake, obviously. I played with him last year. I got to know him. Actually, I've known him more than that. We've been going head to head, for a while there when I was on Nats, and he's a great guy to compete against. And so, when it did become Texas was on the radar, that just trying to get a feel for what the organization was about, and how much he really enjoyed all the guys and the staff here, and that this was a great situation, great fit. The guys are playing hard and playing well together, and that this was a good situation for him. And if I were to come over, it'd be a great situation for myself as well. So, knowing a little history, knowing him as well, made it a little bit easier to put a little trust in his words. I believe what he said, and excited to be here.
Hey Max, Sean McFarland, Dallas Morning News. This is the team playoff World Series aspirations. You've been in those moments, been in those games. What do you think, outside of on-field stuff, you can show this team mindset, what it takes to kind of go through those moments?
For me, my biggest strength is to be a leader by example. I can be a vocal leader, but that's not my best strength. My best strength is to go out there and just show you how I do it. Compete at all times, be prepared, and guys tend to gravitate towards that. That's how they typically follow along, is by following what you do, not what you say. So, for me, now being an elder statesman in this game, being 39 years old. Being now the old guy in the clubhouse, you got to do things right, all the time. So it's something I've dealt with and been with, but I love being in this situation, and look forward to the situation here in Texas.
Considering how you laid it out from what you heard from Steve and Billy, is the Justin Verlander news surprising to you?
No, that was a specific player that we talked about that was under contract for 2024 that could potentially be moved, and obviously Ver got moved, so that was that's no surprise to me.
Is it surprising that the Mets have done a 180 so quickly?
Considering how we thought of our team in spring training, yes, it is. We came in with World Series aspirations in New York. Steve had gone out there and done everything in the world to provide a winning ball club for the Mets organization, and unfortunately we didn't play up to par. A lot of guys didn't play up to the standards. Myself, I'm accountable for that. Obviously, I would like to be pitching better this year. I'm just not. I'm doing everything I can in my power to fix it. Unfortunately, we just didn't have enough wins in the win column to continue to add at the deadline, and because of that, that had a fundamental shift in what the Mets want to do as an organization.
Max, just two for me. But with that being said, do you feel like coming to a first place team can kind of rejuvenate you a bit?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say that, because every time I take the mound, I don't care if I'm first or last. I'm coming out there to pitch at 100%. I'm gonna give you everything I got every single time. But I'm not an idiot. When you have first place on the line, and you have an organization that's trying to win, and you really, it's right in front of us right now that where we're at in the season. There's definitely a jolt. So I like pitching these situations. I like having the ball in this type of atmosphere. I don't get fazed by it. I actually want to rise up to it. So for me, it's good to be in this spot.
And then at this point in your career, how heavily do you rely on your battery mate, and how does that relationship evolve, especially when it's happening mid-season?
Yeah, well, I've been kind of bouncing through a few teams right now, so I've been having to learn quite a few new catchers over the past couple of years, and so it's actually made me kind of reflect upon what I know about myself. Not just to be reliant on one guy. Just having Kurt Suzuki or Matt Wieters, back there, or Wilson Ramos just calling a game for me. I've been having to go through multiple catchers over the past couple of years now, and so I've had to learn what makes me tick well, when do I have success, and trying to identify that, and then especially now with the pitch count, now I can actually call pitches. That's been a new learning curve as well. So. I understand kind of what I got to do to pitch, but at the end of the day, the catcher has a whole vantage point to calling the game that as a pitcher you can't truly supersede. They are definitely a part of the game, definitely part of how they call games and how they work with you. So it will definitely be a learning curve.
Last one, Levi.
So you and Justin Verlander were teammates in Detroit. There's been stories written about you guys' relationship being teammates again this year in New York. Now you both get traded, and you're the big acquisition here. He's the big acquisition for the Astros. You're now competing for a division title with him. Have you talked to him about that? How do you view that? Is that something that you have thought much about?
Yeah, I haven't been able to talk to him. We've been running around in crazy time right now. We did get to talk right there at the end of just understanding that there's been a vision change in the Mets, and that it kind of happened. No one in the organization was kind of thinking that way until just from at least from the player side. Nobody in the clubhouse thought we were going to completely tear down for 2024, and here we are. And just what that means. That he was going to have to make this start against the Nationals, knowing that he's probably going to get traded, and just how weird that was. And I was like, yeah, I had that happen in 2021 against the Phillies, where I'm making a start, like basically knowing I'm getting traded. It's a weird. Very weird start. So, kind of, reliving that. But, it's great to pitch with him again. See where he's developed, where he really has excelled, where he really sees the game, how he sees his pitches, and what makes him tick, and where he sees success. It was a good chance to get back up with him and see where his game is at, and where it continues, and how Houston was involved with that.